So now that we've got sort of the basic, mechanics, the fundamental kind of, grunt work of getting the lights to turn on and the sounds to play. Now let's work on turning this project into an actual game. So one of the things we're going to need is a list of integers that can grow and shrink. So you start off with one light, and then you match that, then you get two lights, you match that, three lights, you match that, and the sequence grows and grows and grows until you can't memorize it anymore, and then it resets to zero, right? So that's the fact that we've got something there that can grow and then shrink, that tells us we need a list. So let's make a list of integers. And why integers? Because we defined our color codes as integers. If we define those as enums, then we make a list of enums. Well, let's make a list of integers, and let's just call it the sequence, because that's it's the sequence of lights that the player's trying to match. And let's allocate that. That's going to be equal to a new. If I hit tab, does it work for me? No. It's going to be a new list of integers. There we go. So we've got a new list of integers called sequence. And we also need to keep track of which one is the player trying to match, right? So imagine that the Simon game has selected a series of lights that's 5 lights long. The player's pushing buttons. We have to, the first time they're matching the first one, the second time they're matching the second one, third time they push a button, they're matching the third thing, right? So we've got to keep track of which color code is the player trying to match. So let's make an integer, and we'll just call it index, because that's actually what it is. Our index variable, it's going to be an index into our list, right? Is the player trying to match the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, right? And remember, indexes start at 0. So let's make a function now that adds a light to the list. And so let's go down here. Let's go to the bottom, and let's make a function called add light. And what this is going to do is it's going to pick a random color code and add it to the list. And then once we've done that, we probably want to start playing the list. So we'll have to add another function here, basically the timer function, the timer tick function. So let's add a 1, 2, 3 adds a new light to the list. Right. So let's generate a random color code. Now we've got to be careful here. Let's go look at our color codes. They start at 1 and not 0. So something 1 to 4 inclusive. So we want red, yellow, green, or blue, right? So let's generate a number 1 to 4 inclusive. Int color equals rand.next. Now look, there's a bunch of overloads here. Min value, max value. The inclusive lower boundary, I was looking for, I was more interested in the max value there. Let's say 1 to 5. If this blows up, we'll know why. This might be, well, actually, you know what we could do? Instead of 1, we could say red to yellow. And if we never see yellow, then that means we're off by 1, and we need to do like yellow plus 1 here. Lights dot sequence dot add color. There we go. And once we've added a color, what we want to do is, the reason we've done this is now we want to set our index back to 0 and replay the list. Because the only time you add a new light or a new light to flash is when the player has matched the entire list and you want to start over. So let's set our index back to 0 and then start the timer. How do we start the timer? Timer1.start. Or we could say timer1.enabled. Now we haven't actually gone and implemented timer1.start, so it's not going to do anything. So that's probably our next stop, is let's go implement timer1.start. So let's go to our form, and I'm going to double click on my timer1. And I probably have that function already. Now this is just going to be a test function here. What I'm going to do is flash the light or turn on the light that corresponds to the current index. But I also have to make sure that I haven't gone off the end of the list. Like when I hit the end of the sequence, I need to shut off the timer. So let me say picture box 1 dot, oh, no, wait, yeah, picture box 1. Oh, no, wait, we already have we've got flashlight sequence, square brackets, index, right? Go look me up the color code for the current light, for the current position, and then flash that. There we go. But what I need to also do, and then add 1 to the sequence, but what I also need to do is shut off the timer. No, not the sequence, index plus. But now if I've hit the end of the list, I need to shut off the timer so I don't try to like play, turn on the light, the color code for position 10 if I don't have 10 lights. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if the index now equals the length of the list, just shut off the timer. So what's that going to do? Sequence dot count, right? Because lists have a count property. Then shut off the timer. Timer1 dot enabled equals false, or I could say timer1 dot stop. They both do the same thing. All right. So now what I'm going to do here is add a bunch of, in my constructor, I'm just going to dump a bunch of things into the list and then call the add light function and see if that actually does anything. Actually, I should be able to just call like add light like a whole bunch of times. Let's try that. So I'm going to go back up to my constructor, test code, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a for loop that runs 10 times, and let me call add light 10 times, and we'll see what that does. Let me run my program. We may have to. That actually worked really well. I think it played too fast, and what happened was the buttons didn't have time to shut off. So let's go change our timer interval, increase it a little bit, and see if what that effect that produces. So let me go into my form designer here, and I'm going to click on my timer, and let's go to the timer properties. Let me set this to be 500, half a second. Let's see what that effect that has. That was actually pretty good, not super random, but let's try it again. Actually, that's about perfect. So, all right, so that was just a little test program. We're not going to keep this code here. Let's just comment it out. What we were really just trying to do is make sure that our flash light function works and that our add light function works. So now let's get this just a little bit closer to being a game. We've got to remove some of our test code here. So we've got this flash light function, and this just turns a light on and off. So let me put in a comment there, turns light on and off. And what we don't want to do here is actually call flash light from our mouse click function. We want to make a new function that's going to kind of handle all the logic about did the player guess correctly, did the player not guess correctly, did they reach the end of the list? Okay, we got to add another thing to the list. Let's make a function here called press button, void press button, and it will take a color code, and that's it. Our color codes are integers. And instead of calling flash light here, what we want to do is call press button, right? This was just test code. This was all just test code right here. Press button, press button, press button, press button. There we go. So we'll use our flash light function for sure in here. So one thing that's kind of creeping into my head, though, is that there are going to be times where it's okay to push a button and times where it's not okay to push a button. And so, for example, when the game is playing back the sequence of lights you're supposed to match, then you shouldn't be able to push a button. After that, you should be able to push a button. So let's go up to the top here. I'm going to add another variable, and I'm going to make it a bool, and maybe we'll call it like, press OK, and we'll set it equal to false. So that means it's not okay for the player to push a button. Is it okay to, is input okay? So when we start kind of cycling through our list, we'll set this to false, and when we're done, we'll set this back to true, and then the player will be able to push a button. So let's go back down to our code here where we handle the button press, and let's just wrap all of this in an if statement that checks to see if it's even okay to push a button. So if tab, there we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all that code that I wrote, and let's just stuff it in there, and we'll say if input it okay, if input it okay, and I don't have to say equals equal. Really, I have to say equals true? No. Oh, is it capital K? Now I'm confused. Okay, it's not called input okay, it's called press okay. So let's go figure that out. Press okay, there we go. So and then the equals true is redundant. We don't really need that. All right. So if it's okay to press a button, then press a button. Okay. There's some progress. Now let's think about our did we have some test? Well, we had some code that checked to see if we hit the timer1.tick. Yeah, if we hit the end of our list, what we probably want to do now is say that it's okay for the player to press a button again. So let's go in here and say press OK equals true, right? So this is our timer function is going to get called when as the game replays its sequence. And then when we get to the end, we shut off the timer and we say, you know what, it is now okay for the player to push buttons again. So actually, if I run this now, let's see what happens. Did I take out all that test code? See, I can't push buttons now because input is not okay, which is okay. So actually, that gets us, within striking range of having a working game. The only thing that we really are missing here is press button, and that's all spelled out in a flow chart. So I'm going to leave that for you to do. And then one other thing, what I would do is let's go back up to the top, and after we are created, after we start the game here, we initialize our maps. Let's call add light, and let's see what add light will. Because we want to kind of prime the game. So add light will put a random light in the list and start our sequence at the beginning, and then start the timer. The timer will play and then shut off, and it'll be okay for us to push buttons. Let's just make sure that that works. So if I run this thing, right, I get one button, and now it's okay for me to push buttons. But what's going on here is we have not implemented the button press or the press button function. That's what you have to do based on the flow chart. But everything that you need here, or everything that you're going to need is all in the code now. It's just a matter of implementing that one function, which is spelled out in the flow chart. So there you go. Have at it. And if you have any questions, just email me.